just going to do my presentation on genders across different cultures. So the first thing I recognized when I started doing research was that there are so many different cultures that have varying gender labels that aren't the binary. So I just wanted to recognize that, and here are a bunch of countries with cultures that recognize different genders. And I'm just going to talk about a few of them today. All right, so Chile. So this is the Maki people of the Mapuche culture. So the Maki are, I would say like a shaman or like a traditional healer or religious leader within this culture. And the main feature of them is that they are gender fluid. And this comes back to their spirituality and healing purposes and all of that. So getting into the spirituality of it, they gain their spirituality from this gender fluidness. It's seen as a strength to be able to both take the gender of masculine, the gender of feminine, and going between the two or simultaneously holding them both. And then they're also a healer. And this also comes back to the gender concept for how they see gender. And because they have this balance of gender, of masculinity and femininity, that helps them heal people. And this balance is a theme throughout other parts of their religion and spirituality. And so people who are sick, they would consider them unbalanced. And because the Machi have this balance of gender, they can help heal people who aren't balanced. And this really plays a part in spiritual ceremonies and connecting with the spiritual world. And that gender fluidity really plays a part and makes them specifically special part of their culture. And actually, so the gender is a really, like I said, important part of the spirituality. And it's also, but they have this split of spirituality versus the physical world, and so gender almost exists in these two different planes. Within the physical or like earthly plane, gender is fixed, so they do recognize that, but then spiritually, like someone can embody a certain gender. It's not fixed just on a person's physical body. So, yeah, so spiritually, gender is fluid, but physically, it's fixed, is how they see it. And moving on, talking about Brazil. Brazil has, from what I read, a huge population of people that are transgender, specifically transgender women. But it's interesting because the labeling seems to be pretty different from the transgender community here. And it's more worded, it would be better worded for gender to be two categories, where it's men and people who aren't men. So women and LGBTQ and just everyone that's not men, which I think is interesting. So people who are transgender in Brazil wouldn't actually label themselves, it seems like, as a woman. But they do make like modifications for their body, and they might use different language to say, oh, I feel like a woman, but they wouldn't necessarily categorize them as that. They would almost categorize themselves as something other, like other than man is kind of the category, it seems like. So yeah, using a lot of third gender language. I feel like a woman, but I'm not a woman. So that's the big difference, is the labeling here in Brazil. All right. India and the hijri. I can't say that, but so the hijras. So this translates as like an irregularity of male genitalia. So they would categorize themselves as neither male nor female. So that could be both being born intersex or transgender. They don't have to be born that way, but they can transition. Yeah. But the interesting thing I also found was that so they categorize themselves as neither male nor female, or yeah. But there was this other label, the Kothi, and these people are specifically a feminine man that dresses and acts and takes the role of a female. So those are two separate terms. And then going back to the Hydra's sexuality, something that was interesting was that some don't define it, and they actually renounce sexuality altogether. And some of them find that sexual energy can turn into like a type of spiritual energy. And it's interesting that this is a group in India because one of India's cultures, Hindu, or their religion, Hindu, they have quite a few deities that they're characterized as being both male and female. This being one of them. I'm not even going to try that one. Yeah, so I thought that was interesting with religion being brought in as well. All right, and then finally, Native Americans, the Two-Spirit. So this was an interesting one because it has, it's a recent term. So Two-Spirit is a term that was created in the 90s to kind of separate. It's a general term, like a general LGBTQ term that's used for Native Americans. And the reason why this was so important for them to have a separate term instead of being an LGBTQ Native American was because ethnicity was a really big deal for them, and they didn't want the sexual orientation or gender identity to overshine the ethnic identity. So that's why they came up with this two-term label. So, but historically, many Native American tribes recognize the variability and fluidity of gender. Some of them being here, so masculine, being physically born masculine and being a masculine person. And then masculine feminine is physically being born masculine and then it being feminine. And same thing with female, with the first one being your physical, how you were born, biology, and the second one being the characteristics of like what you embody. Yeah, so that was just a taste of a few gender differences across cultures. Here's the quiz question, if you want to do it. And then, yeah, this is the answer. So physical gender for them is fixed, but spiritual gender is fluid. So, yeah, and those are some of my references. And that's all.